Welcome back to the Corporate Gossip Podcast. Before we thank all the people who bought us coffee, I just want to give you guys a heads up that starting next season, these shout outs are going to be during the episode rather than at the start of the episode. Okay, this week we have He-Man Kim, Eric T, Chris, Alex, Laura K, Maisie, at Strictly Goats, I love that username, and friend of the pod, Frank. Thank you guys so much. All right, here's the show. It's a cold December night in an airport outside of Osaka. Michael Taylor and George Zayek are waiting to board a private jet headed to Lebanon. The two classical violinists had just wrapped up the Japanese leg of their tour and were closely guarding their music equipment as they impatiently tapped their thighs. From across the room, a gate agent eyed them warily. Something about them seemed off. For starters, they looked more like soldiers than classically trained musicians. Taylor and Zayek were both tall and bulky with closely cropped haircuts. In fact, Zayek had on his face what appeared to be a battle scar. And was that a guitar case on top of the big music equipment box? Didn't they say they played violin? The agent watched as the ground crew escorted the men to the tarmac to board their private jet. Under the bright airport lights, she could see several crew members straining to hoist the heavy equipment box onto the cargo hold. At one point, Taylor and Zayek ran around the side of the jet to help them. People who fly private generally don't load their own luggage, but these guys must be in a big hurry, the agent thought to herself, before returning to her duties. It wasn't until the next morning that she realized what she had witnessed.
The ousted chairman of Nissan has fled Japan,
where he was awaiting trial for financial crimes.
Carlos Ghosn has fled house arrest in Tokyo.
We want to turn to Carlos Ghosn's great escape.
How on earth did Carlos Ghosn make his escape without a passport and while he was under house arrest?
That music equipment box was carrying the disgraced former CEO of Nissan, Carlos Ghosn, who was fleeing criminal charges in Japan. Those musicians were Ghosn's accomplices, who used their backgrounds as Green Berets to smuggle Ghosn to freedom. The escape and the circumstances that led up to it have been the subject of international obsession. Ghosn was, at one time, one of the most powerful executives in the world. Just a few years prior to his arrest, he was a national hero in Japan, renowned for bringing Nissan back to life from the brink of failure. His face was on the cover of magazines, his story was depicted in Japanese manga. He carried the torch at the Olympics in Brazil, where he was born, beaming with pride and waving to onlookers as if to say, "I hope I've made you proud." Haunted by the failures of his father, who spent Carlos's formative years in and out of prison and several years on the lam, Carlos was determined to rewrite his family legacy. And this is exactly why we say all CEOs need to go to therapy, because we know now that Ghosn had already sealed his fate. He was destined to repeat the patterns of his father, only on a much grander scale. Now a fugitive in Lebanon, he spends his days on the news circuit, resuscitating his image and rewriting his story. To him, the ending is still undetermined. Is Carlos Ghosn a hero persecuted or a wolfish egomaniac? This is the Corporate Gossip Podcast. Nissan and Carlos Ghosn, dick in a box.
Speed.
Welcome back to another episode of the Corporate Gossip Podcast. I'm your host, CPA Scorned, Becca Platsky. I'm here with my brother,
Data analytics playboy Adam Platsky.
and today we're talking about Carlos Ghosn, dick in a box. So, this episode to me is very teen boy coded. It's got a lot of themes we've discussed in previous episodes, but that I think, you know, if there's any men in your life, boys in your life, I think they would really like this episode. It's got daddy issues, yachts, parties, sports cars, criminal indictments, escaping the law, going on the lam. This is really, it's got everything. And just so you guys know, in preparation for this episode, Adam read Boundless, The Rise, Fall, and Escape of Carlos Ghosn by Nick Kostov and Sean McLean. I listened to Collision Course, Carlos Ghosn and the Culture Wars That Upended the Auto Empire by Hans Grimmel and Will Spazzato. And then we also watched Fugitive, The Curious Case of Carlos Ghosn, which came out on Netflix last year. And then you watched a couple of other...
Yeah, I watched a lot on a plane, but I fell asleep while I was watching it. But I got the gist, and it led me to reading the book.
Okay. So this is one of those stories where I'll say right off the bat, I'm very conflicted. There's a lot of good, there's innovation, there's excitement, there's turnaround stories, and there's a lot of bad. Greed, power, corruption. All right, you ready to get into it?
Yeah, let's jump in.
All right. First piece of corporate gossip is Carlos Ghosn joins the growing number of wayward CEOs with daddy issues. Here we have Carlos Ghosn as a baby. Why does this baby want to sell me Primerica? I've never seen a baby that looks so much like a little baby businessman before in my life. And I should know, Carlos Ghosn, his name is Ghosn. It's pronounced Ghosn, but we will be pronouncing it like most people do.
Lebanese.
He's Lebanese. He's born in March 9th, 1954 in Porto Velho, Brazil. And his father, George, I think it's Jorge, he worked several jobs. Diamond trader, airline worker, smuggler. And Ghosn's mother, Rose Jazar, was a Nigerian-born Lebanese woman whose family immigrated from Lebanon to Brazil, and she eventually moves the family back to Beirut. And that's when Ghosn's dad murders a priest after a currency smuggling deal went wrong. Ghosn's father flees the scene, hops a flight to Cairo. He's eventually arrested and taken to prison in Lebanon. And that's when he tries to escape by paying off some guards. But again, he's found, and he's found guilty, and he's sentenced to death at 37 years old. A few years later, his death sentence is commuted, and he gets 15 years of hard labor, which he ends up serving about 10 of those years. Ghosn doesn't really mention this episode in his life, but people close to him say it was a really difficult time in his life, obviously. And this is some serious inherited trauma. Like, what are the chances that both you and your dad become international fugitives? I don't know how common that is, but you gotta see the kind of poetic life arc here. One thing that you'll notice about Ghosn, even as a little baby, is his very pronounced eyebrows. And he's got kind of a face that, would you say that's a kid who's up to no good?
Yeah.
So how is Carlos coping? According to him, he's putting himself in a cocoon that would shield him from his family issues. And he's enrolling in a private all-boys school run by Jesuit priests. Ghosn's father is released after about 10 years when Ghosn is 16. But shortly after, he's caught again with $34,000 in counterfeit money. He's imprisoned, then released. And so at this point, Ghosn's father has been in and out of jail for the majority of his life, mainly in. And I did a little research on the long-term effects of parental incarceration on a kid. This is from the National Institute of Health. Children with parents in prison may experience low self-esteem, depression, disturbed sleeping patterns, and as symptoms of post-traumatic stress. They say it's worse for a parent, in some cases, for a parent to be incarcerated than for parents to divorce or even die on the kid's development. So, right, he's acting out in high school. He's rebelling. He's pulling pranks on the priests. He bullied one of the older priests mercilessly. He scribed "down with the old" on a wall at the school, which was like really the last straw. He's kicked out just days before graduation, and he's sent to a prep school in France. And he ends up going to college there and getting a degree in engineering. You ready for the next piece of corporate gossip?
Yeah.
So, corporate gossip number 2 is meet Carlos's new car daddy, Francois Michilin.
Daddy issues. I need a new daddy.
I need a new daddy, and he's going to be my business daddy.
He's going to be daddy, and I'll treat him as my real dad, and it'll make him my real dad, and he'll never disappoint me.
Here's a hot take. We love to do a little bit of armchair diagnoses. If you're having issues with your own parent, I would highly suggest not trying to replace them with your boss. Just my thought.
Or coach or
Partner.
yeah.
Okay, so after Carlos graduates, he gets a job at the French tire manufacturer Michilin. By the time he's 27, he's responsible for a factory in France with 600 employees. So now Carlos is sent to Brazil at 31 to turn around Michelin's business there. And he does. He builds a really close relationship with the founder, Francois Michilin. And this...
I think it's just Michelin.
It's Michelin.
Michelin. This is from a personal history that Ghosn once wrote. He said, the boss I trusted was watching over me. He came to Brazil with his wife in 1987, and I spent 10 days with him, touring factories all over the country. He showed interest in everything and treated everyone with respect, regardless of social class or title, a worthy leader. After he returned home, I was presented with another challenge that would reshape my career. I would go to the U.S., a fiercely competitive region and Michelin's biggest overseas market. I was told that Francois Michilin would leave everything to me. After the Christmas holidays, my young family and I left my homeland once again. And he goes on to say, there's a lot of Francois in me. So, you know, Michilin sends a now 35-year-old Ghosn to Greenville, South Carolina, and he gets to work. And he's under the impression that if he does, he'll get the keys to the Michilin company. Here he is in South Carolina. He sits down in his office in Greenville.
Oh, what a picture. There's a lot of
old white
waspy men in that photo and Carlos Ghosn.
Yeah, it is kind of weird. And it's weird they're all like kind of staring at him in kind of a scary way. And there's a man that appears to be asleep standing up.
You guys hate unions, huh?
There's actually pictures taken from above when all those men are lying down dead.
Carlos sits down in his office in Greenville, opens up the books, and he sees a big issue. Why the fuck are these middle managers making more than me? This cannot stand. So first order of business, he goes back to Michelin HQ and he says, all exec pay, including mine, of course, should be raised in line with their Western counterparts. And after him and his buddies, no wonder they're happy, are taken care of, he starts wielding the axe. He closes several plants. He cuts jobs at remaining plants, despite death threats from unions in Indiana. Ghosn shifts production to non-union plants. And this is where Carlos gets the first of many nicknames. How do you want to pronounce that?
Le Requin.
Le Requin? I'm sorry, guys. We both took Spanish. Or the shark. Because once he grabs hold of something, he will not let it go. After a few years in the South, things are going great for Michelin. Ghosn, on the other hand, feels like he's still getting a shit deal. I mean, look at him. He's running one of the largest employers in town. And he thought that the company would be shocked to learn how little he was being paid given his status. I mean, can you imagine? His wife is driving a Mazda minivan. His friends were driving Porsches.
Yeah, not only that, he has to live in Greenville, South Carolina. When Carlos used to visit the States, he would look at the opulence and the wealth of Manhattan and Los Angeles, and that's what he thought, that's what he was expecting. But he's
living in the suburbs.
Gig in the suburbs.
This is like a theme throughout Ghosn's career. He's like always the victim. He's never being compensated well enough. He's always being like persecuted in some way. And eventually Carlos is starting to see their dirty truth, which is it doesn't matter how much money he brings into the company. And he was actually lied to by Francois Michilin or misled. Because Carlos was never going to take over this company because there's a little Nepo baby standing in his way, Edouard Michilin, and Carlos just doesn't have the right last name. Do you think that there's something here with the experience with his father? Like he's got another male figure in his life who disappoints him?
Yeah, I think there's something with the victim mentality, right? He's like, oh, these men in my life, they just want to, they always let me down. He's going to continue that, right?
Well,
and then he's always going to be the victim.
It's interesting because he has two men in his life now who let him down. Because the next man in his life who kind of becomes another father figure to him, he actually ends up backstabbing, right? So he's like, fuck it. I'm not going to trust these older men in my life anymore. I'm going to take the power now and no one is going to disappoint me. This is just a little armchair psychology. So in 1996, at age 42, he's contacted by Renault, Want to give that a shot?
Renault, that's right.
Renault.
If you watch F1, you would know. Renault, that's how you say it.
So at the time, Renault is a car company that's very important to France and the French people, but it's struggling from a business perspective. It's pretty interesting. The company was founded in 1899, but was accused in the 1940s of collaborating with the Nazis. So it's actually nationalized by Charles de Gaulle in 1945. So still at this time.
The same Charles de Gaulle of Charles de Gaulle Airport?
That's the one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was there a car company not working with the Nazis? I mean, they seem to be like, hey, look, they're doing some bad stuff, but their POs get paid. Their invoices go through.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Well, yeah. it's a good point. But
That's why I stopped wearing Hugo Boss cologne.
Oh, were they?
Hugo Boss made uniforms, the military uniforms for the Nazis.
I bet you,
Side tangent.
No, but I think a lot of probably companies that are a certain number of years old have ties to Nazis at some point.
To the Chick-fil-A of the 90s.
Yeah. So still to this day, it's a national asset. And so that means that the government is very involved in their business. So by 1990s, CEO Louis Schweitzer is looking for a number 2. This is Louis Schweitzer on the left. Adam and I were discussing, I do believe he is probably one of the cutest.
He's Elmer Fudd's son.
He's one of the cutest CEOs, I'd say, up there with John Flannery that we have discussed. Adam says he looks like a real life New Yorker cartoon.
It looks like he's consulting with Mr. Bean.
So Mr. Bean is, a lot of people call Carlos Ghosn Mr. Bean. He's that's a common description of him. Louis Schweitzer is looking for a number 2 at Renault. And he wants this person, whoever he may be, to be able to take over. And he finds Ghosn, and he's impressed. And Ghosn is quoted as saying, I thought that if I were in Louis Schweitzer's place, I would have chosen me too. A few weeks later, Ghosn makes it official and announces his departure from Michelin. Francois Michilin, at the time, was aghast. He viewed Ghosn as another son. You know, he's hurt. He took it as a betrayal, and he asked, why is he leaving me?
You've been a backstabbing bitch since day one.
You will never control me.
Never.
That is from the season of Below Deck. It's a Kyle reference. And ultimately we realize, like, Ghosn is not motivated by familial bonds. He was motivated by money at this point. He's like, this is all I have. Now at this point, fuck you guys. I'm proving that I'm different than my dad. I'm going to become one of the most powerful car executives in the world. Watch me. His fatal flaw is starting to expose itself. Greed. All right, you ready for the next piece of corporate gossip?
Yeah.
We're cooking today.
We're moving.
We're cooking. We're moving as fast as a Nissan GTR. So, corporate gossip.
Wow.
You like that?
You did some research.
I did.
That's on my list of like top 5 cars I'd want to have one day.
Well, hold it.
Really
We're going to
nice.
talk about it in a second. Corporate gossip number 3 is it's time for Carlos Ghosn's makeover montage. Cue the music. So in 1996, Carlos joins Renault as EVP and number 2 to CEO Louis Schweitzer. And he's able to make the company profitable again. I'll give you guys one guess on how he did that.
R&D made him improve processes.
Adam, any guesses?
Worked with his local labor union to negotiate better deals for the workers and the company.
Which in turn made for a happier workforce that worked better and faster because they were invested in the company.
You guys got it exactly right. The end. Psych. Cost cutting, baby. He cost cuts so much that he gets another new nickname. Le cost cutter.
That's just lazy.
This guy has so many nicknames. He's the Andy Bernard of CEOs. Here's the thing. Cost cutting, not super popular with the French unions. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen the French unions. You don't want to fuck with them. They will destroy you.
attack you with baguettes.
They literally will.
I've seen Les Miserables too many times to know that they ain't happy when their stuff get. Look at Paris this year.
A couple years ago. Yeah.
And this year.
Yeah. I mean, these unions do not fuck around. But he did. And to be fair to Ghosn, cost cutting isn't all he's doing. He's also implementing modern management principles. He's fostering a cross-functional work environment, which was new to Renault. And suddenly they have a lot more cash, which they can use to acquire another company. Enter Japanese car maker Nissan, which was in deep, dog shit. The Japanese had basically run this company into a financial ditch, and they had over $20 billion in debt.
Not because they didn't have a good product. They had a great product. They just didn't know how to run the business.
Adam, what were they doing at this point to save money?
Turning off elevators and air conditioning to save money in the office. That's a great idea.
That's a classic Bed Bath & Beyond cost-saving strategy.
Cutting off the air conditioning is the equivalent of a bar today adding a comedy night.
Just a death sentence.
If a bar goes looking for comedy night, that means this bar ain't going to last much longer.
Nissan obviously was in a dire financial straits, and they needed help. And so Renault comes and they say, listen, if we acquire you, we're going to respect you. We get it. Japan and France, they're not like culturally simpatico. There's a lot of differences between these two countries. But they say, we'll let you do your things your way. We'll do things our way. And so Nissan says, if you want to acquire us, you can, but under one condition. Carlos Ghosn leads Nissan. Schweitzer's like, shit, I just brought on this guy to lead my company, and now he's going to go lead a different company. So Ghosn starts to negotiate with Nissan and Schweitzer, and he
gets his new nickname, the Negotiator.
Yeah. No, he didn't get a nickname out of this, but he did do a pretty good job negotiating. He says, look, I'll do it, but you're going to provide me with housing. I want a salary of $1 million. I want 10 million Nissan shares over the next 3 years. That was worth about $30 million at the time. He aimed high, but he was a realist. He was like, I got a 50% chance of making this work. If it fails, I'm out. Nissan's bankrupt. I'd be out of a job. These shares will be worthless. And I will say, this is one of those rare cases where I do think a CEO should be compensated. Like this is a big undertaking to turn around a whole company.
Oh yeah, and the other thing that's not being said is, if he fails, he's not going to be CEO of another company ever again.
Right.
He might get C-suite jobs, but he's done with being CEO.
So normally we're against these high CEO pay packages, but actually I'd say this is one of those rare cases. So it's like, fuck it. Let's just go for broke. Let's throw as much money as we can at this guy and see if it works. Otherwise, we're all out of jobs. Schweitzer knew. He thought that Ghosn's compensation was ridiculous, but he's backed into a corner. The Japanese only agreed to a deal because of Ghosn. So it's inked, and Ghosn goes to be CEO of Nissan. And most Nissan employees were not thrilled with the deal. Renault is kind of a crummy car maker in their eyes. They feel like it's an inferior product compared to Nissan. There was talk at one point about these companies merging, but that really feels like a pipe dream. They couldn't be further apart. It didn't, honestly, even at the time, it didn't make a ton of sense that these companies would merge. They're so different. There's not a lot of similar parts, different cultures, different markets. I don't really see a ton of the synergies that management talks about. And it seems like there are a lot of mergers that we still see today that it kind of becomes like an ego play. The execs don't really care about operational efficiencies. They just want more people, more power, more money. And it's giving a little bit of that to me. So Carlos arrives in Japan in the spring of 1999. He worked from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. and he loved that people knew it. He got another nickname, Mr. 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven-san. And he's doing things differently. He's not following organizational rules. He's meeting directly with middle managers. He's tapping younger employees for new ideas. And the Japanese are skeptical. They're like, this Mr. Bean looking middle-aged guy is going to turn us around? All right. His appeal for input from the rank and file was a departure for Japan. But it was good. It helped Ghosn earn the trust of these Nissan workers. His assessment of what he sees, this is all wrong. Was that good?
Yeah. Is that Greta Thunberg?
Yeah.
Wow, that's really good.
He says, there's too much bureaucracy. You're too slow. I don't like this practice of kiratsu, which is a Japanese practice of essentially companies within an industry being heavily invested in one another.
Yeah, so the reason for this is to eliminate market fluctuations. So if one industry is going through a tough time, the other industries kind of keep it up.
Yeah.
Keep it afloat.
The problem with that is, as much as it seems nice, it ties up a lot of capital. And Ghosn didn't like that. And he said, fuck it, I'm out here for myself. I'm turning this company around. We're divesting from kiratsu, which again is a pretty big departure from the norms of Japanese culture, but I need cash. I need cash now. He J.G. Wentworth's that shit.
Yeah.
So by October of 1999, Ghosn's diagnosis and treatment plan are complete. Here he is announcing his Nissan revival plan. He says, listen, if we're not profitable by the year 2000, our entire executive committee would resign. I want to see more of that. How's he going to do it? He's going to close 5 plants, cut 21,000 jobs, cut costs by 20% over the next 3 years, and dismantle Kiriatsu. But here's the thing. The layoffs weren't great, but on the flip side, after those layoffs, by 2000, the numbers were even better than expected. They went from $20 billion in debt to $15 billion in the bank. They doubled production. It was
15
million in the bank.
So a net turnaround of $20 billion, $20 billion, 15 million.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they doubled production. It was crazy. And beyond that, they were able to hire more than the 21,000 people they laid off.
This is where the conflict comes in.
This is where,
work.
and this is where, so a lot of people, there was a question around, our acronym DOLF, downsizing, offshore, layoff, and fraud. And people are like, isn't downsizing and layoffs the same thing? Not really. Layoffs are when you kind of temporarily reduce your workforce because you need cash to invest in some new business. And the intent is that you will hire these people back once you're in a better financial position. Downsizing is permanently reducing your workforce because you are shutting down a business line, or you're shutting down, like, for example, if you stopped making a certain car, that would be downsizing. So sometimes it's not ideal and it shows piss poor planning, but layoffs are necessary, right? This would be one of those times. In addition to being in a better financial position, they're also in a better production position, and they debut a new sports car, the Nissan GTR, which is like a teenage boy's dream. There's a clip of him in the Fugitive documentary where he is driving around this Nissan GTR with a reporter, and I never really see him smile, but he's smiling as much as I've ever seen him in this car. Otherwise, he's like deadly serious. And Mike, you said you love, I don't know shit about sports cars, but what's so great about it?
Well, no one really took it that seriously because Nissan is not a sports car company. But it did well, and you still see them out on the road. Like,
and you said you want?
I still think they look really cool. It's like the Nissan Z. Remember the Z that came out?
They brought it back, the 350Z.
Yeah, but it was before the 350Z, I believe. Or it was right around that same time, and it was like not as obvious as like a Nissan car. It very much looked like a more modern muscle car. It just had really sleek lines, and it was. I'd still love that one. In my massive garage filled with cars, all that. Yeah. Not my daily driver.
Not my daily. No.
Right.
I'm an F-150. I drive an F-150 on my daily driver.
Well, right. I mean, and no car can really beat a 2007 Honda Accord.
No, God, no.
Can we also talk about how ahead of the time Ghosn was when it came to electric vehicles? He debuts the Nissan Leaf in 2010. The Tesla Roadster had come out a few years earlier, but like at that point, I think only a few hundred cars had been sold. There's hundreds of thousands of Nissan Leafs out there. In fact, the Nissan Leaf was the world's all-time top-selling plug-in electric car until it was surpassed just a couple years ago by Tesla.
Yeah, it's a shame it was a really hideous-looking car.
I think it's cute. It reminds me of the Prius.
But I can't think it appeals to a certain person.
Well, that's fine. Anyway, so at this point, because of the turnaround, the innovation, I mean, Nissan's in a great place, and Ghosn's bet paid off, and bigly, because he's becoming a legitimate Japanese celebrity. He's swamped by paparazzi when he would go out. They put him in Manga, which is very unusual. The Japanese Prime Minister, Koizumi at the time, said once on the campaign trail that he wanted more people to be like Carlos Ghosn. I love this next picture. This is him carrying the Olympic flame in Rio 2016 Olympics. In a poll asking Japanese people which celebrity they would choose to lead the country after its deadly 2011 earthquake, which killed over 19,000 people, Ghosn was one of only 2 non-Japanese on the list. The other was then U.S. President Barack Obama, 2 slots below Ghosn.
Wow.
As Ghosn's ego and fame rose, so too did Nissan's share price. It's 300% growth.
We love those lines, baby. Show me
Number
more lines.
go up,
Number
baby.
go up.
Anyway, so now it's time for the makeover montage.
Let's do a makeover.
No.
No. Oh, come on, let us. Cher's main thrill in life is a makeover, okay? It gives her a sense of control in a world full of chaos. Please.
Sure. Why not?
He loses 20 pounds, he gets a hair transplant, he gets LASIK. Allegedly, he was wearing shoes with lifts.
Were they cowboy boots?
Nope, it's just regular.
So did he have like kneecap surgery? They extend him out, crank him out. Crank.
He buys new suits. Sex appeal.
Sex appeal. That's what you do. You lose 20 pounds, you get a hair transplant, you lose the glasses.
Yeah.
You take the lifts out of your shoes and you're sexy.
But my question is, what does the CEO's glow up say about them? We got Jeff Bezos, we got Elon. I want to see a CEO who's just committed to their look. And it just goes to show you how these CEOs
All
are.
of them have become really vapid. Even Zuck doing the UFC thing. And
That's
getting
right. Like, none of these guys have, again, I need mandatory therapy for CEOs.
Built. SBF didn't even get a chance to glow
I
up.
know.
What do you think that would have looked like?
I think he had potential.
From what, a 2 to a 4?
I think he could have gone to a 5.
Wow.
So, all right. Corporate gossip number 4. Carlos Ghosn enters his Dwight Schrute era. So, around the 2000s, 2001 to 2004, Louis Schweitzer starts thinking about retirement. He's like, all right, Ghosn, you had fun in Japan. Now it's time to come back home to daddy and replace me at Renault. Right? You're going to take over the family business. But the problem is, Nissan's now bigger than Renault. This would be like, for Ghosn, taking a demotion. It'd be like Steve Jobs going to Motorola after Apple.
Or Kyocera.
But Carlos says, hang on a second. This is how he's Dwight Schrute. He's like, I actually have the mental capacity of a grown man and a small baby. I am so smart that I actually can run both Nissan and Renault at the same time.
But wait, Carlos, they're in 2 different time zones. One's in Europe and one's in Asia. Not even 2 different time zones, 2 different continents. How could you ever do that?
Because I'm Carlos motherfucking Ghosn.
Wait, tell me that I can't do both. Or you're going to come back now to Renault?
Okay, Carlos, it's time to come back to Renault.
False.
On April 29th, 2005, Ghosn becomes CEO of Renault and CEO of Nissan. This is supposed to be a short-term arrangement. Remember that. Here he is going back and forth on the PJ between 2 different continents. And here's a description from, I think this is Boundless.
Yeah.
This is from Boundless. So after having dinner at home in Tokyo, he packs his bags and headed to the airport shortly before midnight to board Nissan's private jet. 16 and a half hours later, at 8:30 a.m. in Paris, he's sitting in his airy executive suite at Renault's headquarters. In front of him were several stacks of paper that had accumulated since his last visit. Upon arrival in Paris, Ghosn goes through a now familiar routine. He stashed his black briefcase containing his Nissan documents and opened an identical briefcase containing his Renault files. The 2, which he swapped back on return trips, symbolized his new life, a foot in both worlds, each accompanied by a briefcase to keep him abreast of the respective issues that required his attention.
Dude, it's 2014. You don't need briefcase no more.
That's so true. Like, you can't just, get a different iPad.
2 laptops, bro.
Yeah, but
Yo, just open up another tab, dude.
Yeah, dude, another tab.
I think this episode will absolutely break the record for most accents.
He changed the name, the pronunciation of the French company to Renault.
Just so you guys don't think that Mike is making Philly culture his costume, Mike is a Philly native.
Do you think you can run both companies at the same time? Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The bear shit in the woods? Yeah.
Yeah, hey, ask me if I can do both at the same time.
Can you run both Renault and Nissan at the same time?
Go birds.
In the future, Ghosn said, I'm going to appoint a separate successor for Renault and another one for Nissan. The implication being no mere mortal could possibly handle the load. He's just so irreplaceable. But here's the problem. But shocker, Ghosn's actually not a super genius who has double the brain power of a normal human. The COO of Renault, Patrick Pallotta, knew Ghosn when he was at just Nissan as razor sharp. But when he's running both of these companies at the same time, things are falling through the cracks. He used to know all the details. Now he's forgetful. He forgets some documents in Paris. He closes a tab.
Oh yeah, that briefcase. Oh fuck, I forgot it.
Oh, I forgot my briefcase.
Bro. I left it at the link.
He used to know all the details. Now he's forgetful. He's hard to catch. He's slipping. But there is one thing that Ghosn is hyper focused on. Getting people to work as hard as possible so they could deliver on these insane production targets. He says in a couple years, we're going to release tons of new cars at Renault. We're going to do the same thing we did at Nissan. We're going to run it again. This reminds me very much, by the way, like there's a lot of Carlos Ghosn that I see in Elon Musk. In terms of taking over, being CEO of 2 companies, he does the same thing.
And as of being bald once, no longer.
Also having a
glow up.
He tells employees to pledge that they will be, he doesn't use this word, but I'll use it, super hardcore, work 12-hour days every day, even on the weekends, and no mistakes would be tolerated. You'd be fired or you'd be humiliated by management publicly, which is exactly what Elon did. This is where it gets serious. With trigger warning, we're about to talk about suicide. So there's a woman whose husband worked for Ghosn at Renault at the time. She said he's working 100-hour weeks. He's crying himself to sleep. He can't sleep. He's miserable. He killed himself. He was the 3rd Renault suicide in a span of 4 months. And then there was another attempt. The woman describes him forgetting where he was because of the pressure. And it's like, at what time does it become a crime for companies to work people to death? I need to know. Renault is found civilly liable, but nobody goes to jail. And it's that, to me, this is where I really turn on Ghosn. All right, you ready to move to the next piece of corporate gossip?
Yeah, number 5.
Corporate gossip number 5. Ghosn goes to the next step in the CEO playbook. Time for an ostentatious company-sponsored personal party that definitely will have no negative PR implications whatsoever. So here's where we need to set the stage. Now that he's the CEO of 2 companies, we got to come back to his compensation. Remember, when he first took over at Nissan, he had negotiated for himself $1 million compensation. All of this has ballooned tremendously. He's pulling in $18 million a year. And in addition to the $18 million, he's also getting $500,000 housing expenses for his houses in France and Japan. He's getting a home leave allowance, which is reimbursement for first-class travel for his wife and kids. All of his kids get sent to Stanford for free. He gets a company car. He gets a company allowances for wardrobe. He gets a jet. And he gets a pay bump to cover his income taxes, which is like, this one is especially insane. And I honestly feel like if we were ever to get a wealth tax in America, we'd see CEOs getting this benefit. So you'd think Ghosn, who would relish being seen as this rich celebrity CEO, would be super flashy and he'd show off his fat paycheck. But that's actually not the case because of a new regulation. In 2010, Japan enacted a law that required all CEOs who made more than $1 million, or I think it's like 100 million yen, to disclose their pay. Up to this point, Ghosn's pay was not public, and his pay was way more than $1 million. Ghosn knew that he could not report that he was making $17 million. The average executive in Japan at Toyota at the time was making $500,000. And if there's anything that Japanese and France corporate culture have in common, it's that executive pay, excessive executive pay, is really frowned upon. So he's like, shit. Everybody knows me as le cost cutter, but they don't know how much I'm making. Should I take a pay cut? Nah. So he calls up a Nissan executive. Okay, this is an important character for the rest of the story. A lawyer. His name is Greg Kelly. And he sees what can I do about this? Greg says, I don't think it would be so bad if you made less money. Like, how about $9.6 million? You're under the 2-digit threshold. Carlos is like, cool. But what about the other $8 million? And Greg Kelly's in a bind. He knows what Ghosn is asking of him to find a way to get him the balance of his salary without having to report it to the government and in turn the public. Greg didn't want to do the fraud. This is what I believe. But he felt like he didn't have a choice. There are other car companies at the time, like GM in the U.S. who are saying, come to America, work at our company where you can be paid more than $17 million and no one's going to have a problem
Ford was
with it.
actively trying to recruit him after Bill Ford had stepped down.
And he wasn't afraid to walk away. He'd walk away from Michelin. He walked away from his own, surrogate father. And so Greg Kelly knew, if I don't find a way to get this guy his money, he's going to leave and we're fucked because we need Ghosn. He's the hero, right? So Kelly, this is from Boundless. Kelly called his favorite legal advisor, Scott Becker. Here comes another accent, guys. A no-nonsense, get-it-done Nissan lawyer based in Tennessee. The two men zeroed in on a promising way to get Ghosn more cash. Under Japanese law, Ghosn would not have to disclose any pay from, say, a Nissan Renault subsidiary. Genius! We got a simple paperwork shuffle. Ghosn could keep up the payments on his G-Wagon, and the Japanese government would be none the wiser. Even at $9.6 million, though, which is what he did report, he's still by far the highest paid executive in Japan. And his defense, okay, so for Japan, my salary is high, but when you look at the other CEOs in America, for example, I'm below average, which this reminds me of like a toxic parent who's like, you could have it so much worse.
Yeah.
The men also used a few more paperwork shuffles to buy Ghosn some properties through various hidden subsidies, including a $5.9 million beach house near Copacabana in Rio and a $9.4 million historical mansion in Beirut. So now Ghosn's got it all. He's rich. He's hot.
Ish.
Smoking hot.
Smoking hot. It's time for my midlife crisis. I need a new wife. And I've already picked her out. Carol Nahas. She owned a high-end caftan boutique. And he met her years prior when he was married to his wife of many years, Rita. Rita agreed to a divorce in 2012. Her settlement is what I like to call the Rupert Murdoch special, a $30 million payment and $2 million a year for the next 15 years with a guarantee from the bank.
Oh, yeah, that's like my girl Sutton. She got the same thing.
Yep, she got...
Name them. Name them.
So he goes, new wife, new life. I'm like Kyle Richards, right? I got a party now. Interestingly, speaking of Kyle Richards, Carlos Ghosn also apparently doesn't drink, doesn't smoke. He's like a teetotaler, which I always think is an interesting fact about people. So what else are you going to do? We got to celebrate, Guys, come on down.
To Chuck E. Cheese.
Not Chuck E. Cheese. Close. He's throwing a party
Cipriani.
Not Cipriani. Versailles. He's throwing a party at Versailles.
That's better than Cipriani.
Better than Cipriani. I'd say right on the same level as Chuck E. Cheese. Yeah. Celebrating the 15-year anniversary of the Nissan Renault alliance. And the budget, 300,000 euros. Who would be invited?
Who's paying?
Nissan and Renault is a party for the alliance, right?
Right.
That just so happens to land on the same day as Carlos's 60th birthday.
Oh.
It's total. It was just, they didn't have any availability. It was just like total chance. So who's he going to invite? The employees?
The middle management.
The thing is, none of these people were invited.
Wait, Nissan service advisors at your local Nissan dealer?
Yeah. Your local Nissan sales agent.
Their invitations were lost in the mail. In the documentary, they asked Louis Schweitzer, they're like, were you invited to the 15-year anniversary of the alliance that you helped create? And he was like, I was not invited to the party. Which is like, Louis Schweitzer, I just want to tell you, I want to put out a formal invitation to any party I'll ever hold. You and John Flannery are more than welcome to show up at our dinner parties in Queens. So...
You just have to sit on the couch.
You have to sit on the couch and you have to eat on the on the coffee
and
table.
my dog's gonna look at you violently.
Yeah.
But
okay. No, you know what? You can sit at the counter. Okay. I'll sit on the couch. Okay. So King Carlos only wants politicians, celebrities, heads of state at the party. It's giving Peloton. Dinner would be served by celebrity chef Elaine Ducasse. Do you know this? There's one big issue.
This is my high school. This is every high school kid's worst nightmare.
That's why this episode is teen boy coded.
Oh.
Because nobody wants to come to Ghosn's party. It's like the part of the movie where the nerd turned hot chick is now realizing that all of her popular friends are total flakes and she should have stayed friends with the nerds. because the Chinese declined, the Russians couldn't travel due to sanctions, and people don't want to just fly for France for a dinner. I would have gone, but
I'm imagining the party planner being like, and the Chinese, are they coming? No, they've declined. The Russians? No, they've declined. All right, well,
they're war criminals. We can't get them over here.
Yeah.
No, they're not coming, Carlos.
And he's like, shit, what do I do? I can't have a party at Versailles for 150 people and only 20 people show up. So what I'm going to do, I hire actors.
I'm going to go to backstage.com.
He hires actors
I would have sent a self-tape in for this.
to dress in a tri-corner hat and silk stockings so they would look like 18th century nobility. This party is crazy. It's got tower of macarons, profiteroles. The MC is in a powdered wig, feathered cap. There's fireworks. Party ends up being slightly over budget by 230 euros.
How do you have nobody show up and go over budget?
Because those actors, you have to pay the
He didn't
actors.
account for the actors.
What was in the gift bag? A GTR.
Cars.
1,000 euros. After the party, some of the Renault finance team asked Dominique Thorman, the CFO of Renault, about the party. He goes, what party? This is like you throw a party with your parents out of town and you see pictures on Facebook. Here's a picture. There's not a ton of pictures of this party, but just don't worry.
Oh, we forgot to hire a photographer. Oh, I guess it did happen, though. People came out. It was pretty sick.
It was awesome.
It was tight.
He's like, he doesn't want to brag about the party because he doesn't want Renault to know, but he also wants people to know he threw a fucking banger. Like,
No, it was dope. It was dope.
yeah, everybody came. So,
You ever seen Project X? It's just like that. No videos, though.
Less teenagers.
We're just going to get to the chase. The next 2 years later, is like, guys, that party was so fun at Versailles. You want to do it again? He throws another party at Versailles.
But for his new boo.
For Carol. 50th birthday for Carol. Budget of 250,000 euros. 120 guests. Here's a description. Carol wants a simple dinner that is chic and elegant, and she is counting a great deal on this soiree. Among the lengthy list of requests were a very opulent dessert table and specifics on everything from timing of music to antique crystal glasses to the proportions of Moet and Chandon and Millésime champagne. For the red carpet at the entrance, she specified, "Thank you for doing a red carpet and not fuchsia." Oh, can you imagine? To make the evening extra festive, Cheryl and her event planner opted for an elaborate Marie Antoinette themed party, complete with no shortage of assorted cakes. Actors were hired to dress up as courtiers to complete the immersive, privilege-soaked scene.
Were these guys SAG?
Literally, is that the only fucking party theme you can come up with?
I want to eat sushi off of a person's body, and then for dessert, I want to eat the person. How about that?
Yeah. But like the only theme they can come up with is Marie Antoinette, Versailles, French nobility themed. Like, God.
Well, what's the other option? Gone country?
Yeah, at Versailles, what are you going to do?
Everyone wears a straw hat and no shoes. Flip-flops or you don't come in. No shoes, no problem.
ABC party, anything but clothes.
Yeah, ABC party. Corporate hoes and CEOs. I could come up with a bunch. So, of the party, get this, Carol told the Town and Country magazine, "We wanted it to feel as if we were inviting guests into our home. Nothing too studied." Well, here's how it turned out. If you're watching on YouTube, you're going to see the images, or you can just go to the Substack. Here's some images. It looks like Carl and Carol, and I think that's his kids.
The kids.
And it's a profiterole tower?
That's a profiterole tower.
Here she comes walking in, all the actors. All right, you ready for your next piece of corporate gossip?
Oh man, that was a lot of parties.
That was a lot of
parties.
Corporate gossip number 6 is all partied out, or the party's over. So for his last act of CEO, he's getting ready to retire, right? And he's like, I'm going to buy a 35% stake in Mitsubishi, does some classic Ghosn style cost cutting, gets some lots of lovin'. And after the 10 years at the top of CEO at Nissan, he steps down and he passes the reign to a man called Hiroto Saikawa. So, now that he's no longer CEO of Nissan and Renault, what about his salary? This is an excerpt from Boundless when he's asked about this by reporters. He explained that in a company as large as the three-way alliance he'd assembled, with $200 billion in revenue and $10 billion in profit, a few $1 million to have a good boss was a drop in the ocean. He goes, this might shock you. Me, I'm not very well paid. The gall. Meanwhile, at Renault, Ghosn's CEO contract would be up in 2018. If Ghosn stayed, the French state had two demands, a pay cut and you have to finally merge Nissan and Renault. This is something they promised 10 years ago that hadn't been done. Ghosn says, if you want me to take a pay cut, I'm fucking out then. I'm not doing this. Greg Kelly comes and says, look, we got to find a way to get you more money so that you can stay. He ends up finding a way, another paperwork shuffle, to pay Ghosn his full salary. At the time, Ghosn had estimated that his net worth was between $820 million and $900 million. And the way that we know this is he kept a running net worth tab on his phone where he's keeping track of his own net worth.
I do that too.
Yeah. You know how we talk about how money takes ice cream scoops out of your brain? Here's what else it does. By the time Ghosn had had 19 years on the job, he was so isolated from those around him, says the book Collision Course. He's very disconnected from the business. He doesn't see looming threats around him. He's managing through a very small team that he'd become very alone in his own company, said one consultant. Why he couldn't see what was happening, it was so obvious. In the documentary, we see that nobody was allowed to defy him. People hung on every word because their job depended on it. Remember, he's the cost killer. He'll cut you if he doesn't like what you said. The environment that Ghosn has created where he's so high above everybody also makes him super paranoid, to the point where he's accusing Renault employees of leaking trade secrets to China with no evidence. Eventually, this is exposed and he has to go apologize on TV after publicly accusing these guys, threatening to ruin their life. At this point, this is a few years after the employee suicides, and now management is accusing, threatening publicly to ruin these people's lives, and the employees think that upper management has gone crazy. And this is the beginning of the end. There's a quote from Ghosn's speechwriter describing the way the Japanese felt about Ghosn at the time. And this is why this guy's a speechwriter. He goes, at the time, Carlos Ghosn was like a prostate exam for the Japanese people. They know it's healthy, they know it's necessary, but it's still a goddamn indignity to have somebody shove their hand up your ass. And eventually, they're going to react rather violently against this. So I think with that, it's time to take a break, and we will be back with the next piece of corporate gossip.
Yes, let's take a break.
Ready for corporate gossip number 7?
Yeah, corporate gossip number 7.
What do they say? You either die a hero or live long enough to be smuggled out of Japan in an equipment box? Something like that. Anyway, 2017, the villain enters Carlos Ghosn's story. And isn't this perfect? The villain is an accountant. His name, Hidetoshi Imazu, one of Nissan's Kansayaku, a special supervisor tasked with checking the books and monitoring the conduct of the board members at Japanese corporations. And he starts to smell something funky. He sees that all these funds and subsidiaries seem to funnel a shit ton of money to Ghosn. So he brings this evidence to the CEO of Nissan, who passes it on to the Japanese government. And they're looking through and they're realizing like evidence is starting to stack up against Ghosn, but they need to talk to somebody. And the person they need to talk to is Greg Kelly. He's critical. He's involved in all these transactions. He's having conversations with Ghosn, but the problem was Kelly at the time was in Tennessee preparing for spinal surgery. Nissan, along with the Japanese government, pulls together a sting operation, basically, to get Kelly on Japanese soil. They call him up and they said, hey, we need you to discuss Ghosn's bonus package and retirement in person. Kelly's like, that's weird. Like, can't we do this over WebEx? Like, I don't need to be there. And like, you need to be there. And he's like, I'm having spinal surgery in a couple days. Like, can I be back before Thanksgiving? And they're like, yeah, actually, we'll charter you a jet and come to Japan. And in interviews after, he's like, yeah, I did think that was kind of weird, but I was like, I guess if you need me, I'll be there. So he spends his 18-hour flight in pain because he's about to have spinal fusion surgery. And once he lands, he's arrested. And what Kelly doesn't know at the time is that Ghosn had been arrested a couple of hours before he was arrested. And You do not want to be arrested in Japan. In America, we have innocent until proven guilty. In Japan, it's guilty until proven innocent. They call it hostage justice. They've got a 99% conviction rate, although they only bring like 37% of cases to trial, but that's because they basically coerce you into admitting guilt because you're being detained in a Japanese prison. They make life hell for you. Until they convict, and they interrogate you without lawyers. You're often held in solitary confinement. By 2019, Ghosn has been in and out of Japanese prisons. He's been released under supervision for $1 billion yen bail. As a condition of his bail, he can't talk to anybody about his case. And I should add, too, while he was in jail, he was in solitary confinement for 137 days. But once he's out, he can't speak to anybody about his case, even his wife, at all. So bail doesn't seem to him much like prison. He's basically stuck in his apartment alone. And a trial date isn't being set. The judge keeps kind of procrastinating setting a trial date. So he's like, even if I do get a trial, I don't know when that's going to be. I'm worried it's not going to be a fair trial. I'm worried that like the Japanese justice system has already decided that I'm guilty. The Japanese have kind of like turned against me. And I'm 65. Like, how long is my life going to be like this? So this is him. I mean, he is being followed everywhere by the paparazzi. He is like a person of national interest in Japan. And there's some like weird symmetry because it's very similar to what he experienced at the height of his fame, but like now for a very different reason in Japan. Oops. So
sorry.
This is fine. The press is following him, his every move. What the press is not picking up is that he's plotting his escape from Japan with the help of a man named Michael Taylor, an ex-Special Forces soldier who went into private security after the 2003 invasion of Iraq. His specialty is rescuing hostages. It should be noted that Michael Taylor had a history of some shady shit. He planted drugs in the car of a client's estranged wife to discredit the woman during a custody dispute. And maybe, in my opinion, one of the most alarming red flags, his wife says that his favorite song is the national anthem.
What a psycho.
He, along with his son Peter and another associate, start to plan the operation. They'd talk on WhatsApp. They'd meet in person. Sometimes Carol Ghosn would be there. She'd take minutes. Again, I don't understand the propensity to take notes on crimes. The Ghosns paid $870,000 to Taylor for the escape. Interestingly, some of that money goes to a Lebanon-based digital marketing agency to start a positive public relations campaign there for Ghosn. So go to the next page. So these are like famous billboards in Lebanon that say, "We are all Carlos Ghosn." And this is before he would eventually get there, right? So the plan was that Taylor and his associate, George Zayek, would go to Tokyo undercover and get Ghosn out of there. So just days after Christmas, Michael Taylor and George Zayek are en route to Japan for a classical concert. At least that's what they told the Japanese government. Taylor and Zayek were actually in Japan for a Judd Apatow take on the Shawshank Redemption to free Carlos Ghosn. Are you ready, Adam? I think it's time for you to take over.
Me. So on December 27th, George Zayek and Michael Taylor arrive in Dubai for a connecting private flight to Japan. Their cover story is they're going for a classical music concert, right? Well, Taylor realizes in Dubai that his classical music cover story has a few holes in it, so he gathers some supplies in the form of a guitar, complete with a case at the Dubai airport, because, you know, they're musicians after all. Mind you, they were supposed to be violinists, not guitarists. So this is a quote from the book from Michael Taylor directly. You know, if you don't have a guitar case, people see boxes. He thought, with the case, it sends an optic. Okay, these guys are musicians.
What, you guys want to see me play Wonderwall? I'll do it.
So this is the first of many red flags. Why would two concert violinists have guitars? Not only that, but they were traveling with amplifier boxes. I'm no expert, but I know many classically trained musicians who travel with Metallica-style amps. So, all right, they're at the Dubai airport and they're about to hop on their private jet to Japan, which for me is another red flag. Like, why are these violinists traveling on a PJ? According to interviews with the custom agents, these guys kept the red flags rolling. These are two grizzled war veterans who, like, fought in Fallujah. George Zayak has battle scars on his face and deafness in his left ear. These injuries are obviously consistent with a violinist.
Right.
They dropped the luggage off at the staging hotel, and they would leave shortly to get Carlos. The plan at this point, when they had left the staging hotel, was to do a dry run with Carlos. They didn't plan on doing the entire escape. Meanwhile, Carlos is still under house arrest in Japan. The morning of his escape, he goes to brunch with his daughter, Maya. After the brunch, they say their goodbyes. So according to Boundless, the goodbyes were like super emotional. So that makes me think that Maya was complicit, right?
Isn't there also evidence that Ghosn's son sent Bitcoin to these guys too?
Yeah, there's a lot of transfers, and I mean, Carol was taking notes,
right.
So the family was involved, right? So Maya,
maybe allegedly. So there's another part, by the way, when he's saying goodbye. In the documentary, it talks about his housekeeper, who he had developed a really close relationship with. On the night before his escape, he's like, gives her a hug, which he had never done before. He's like, hey, pick out 2 bottles of wine you can have. She takes it. And as she's describing it, she's crying because she's like, I was never going to see this guy again. And,
crazy.
Yeah.
So then Ghosn puts on his inconspicuous getup and walks to the Grand Hyatt to meet Michael Taylor's son, Peter Taylor. So Peter and Ghosn are basically waiting for Michael and George to arrive in the hotel room, and the book notes, they're like, what do you think that conversation was like? He's just like, yeah, so I guess my dad's just going to
stick you in a box.
So what's the plan? Like, all right. And then...
I know what it was. It was, how about them birds?
Local birds.
You know any good ramen spots while I'm here?
I'm trying to get a banh mi.
Yeah.
I told my girlfriend this was a mileage run.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny.
So Michael Taylor, George Zayak, and Carlos Ghosn have now rendezvoused, and they're headed to the train station to catch a train to Osaka. Taylor gave Ghosn a quick Black Ops lesson on how to avoid detection. This consisted of limiting Carlos's social interactions and covering him completely, including a surgical mask. Remember, Carlos, what you said, super recognizable.
Okay.
People are following.
Here's one thing I would have done. Wax his eyebrows. That's like half the battle. Like a nice threading, he would not be recognizable anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm curious, but I agree. Like, I think I'm sure chances are somebody recognized him, but whatever. So it's now around 8 p.m. The 3 men have successfully exited the train. They've taken a taxi, and they're at the staging hotel where their Trojan horse could finally be assembled. And it was at that point they realized there would be no dry run, and they would be doing it.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live.
And just like that Bill O'Reilly drop, this plan is a piece of fucking shit. Carlos inspects his Trojan horse, which is a plastic amplifier box that Michael Taylor drilled 200 holes into so he could breathe. And Ghosn jumps right in.
Go to the next page, Mike, because you'll see this is security video from the escape, and you can see the music box that he's crouching into.
I think maybe they just were like, do you think this is where Taylor Swift got her idea to come on stage every day?
Yeah.
If he can't do it, I can.
Yeah.
So Ghosn and Zayak are preparing the hotel for departure, and Taylor's like, you know what? I'm just going to go to the terminal and like make sure everything's running smoothly. What he ends up doing is raising just like so many red flags. Like, this guy, if his specialty is helping people escape, you wouldn't know it. You would be shocked. So what Taylor does is he goes to the terminal, he starts asking the security team if they're going to be, checking boxes.
What? That is crazy to me.
The box that a person is in.
Are you going to check my bag? I just want to know. It's like, yeah, now I am.
So the security team is like, no, it's not typically the case. It's a private jet, so we'll help you load your stuff on. But Taylor's super nervous, still very nervous. So he uses the classic Green Beret technique. Michael Taylor gives this Japanese security agent an envelope with 10 G's in it as gratuity. He then leaves. After he leaves, the gate agent is just like super flustered because he can't accept any tips.
Yeah.
And I don't think in Japanese culture, tipping is the norm. So the security agent now has to report it to his higher up, which never had to happen if he never gave him the 10 grand. Okay, so Taylor refuses to take the bribe back, and he goes back to the hotel before his blunder could be realized. So Ghosn is now in the box, and they're ready to head to the terminal. As an added security measure, Taylor decides to put his newly purchased guitar case on top of the box. The logic here is airtight. The security agent surely wouldn't lift a guitar box off of the amp to check the amp box because the guitar was on top.
My question is, like, what was the plan if somebody was like, can I take a peek in that amp box? Like, what was Carlos going to do? Like,
you got me.
What? Oh my God, I was just sleeping.
This looks different than solitary confinement. Okay, it's 10 p.m. They're in the terminal. Zayak and Taylor are wheeling Ghosn through the terminal and passing him off to security. Security is still reeling from the bribe and trying to give it back to Taylor, which I think they eventually gave back. The employees start loading the luggage. One notices that the amp box is significantly heavier than when he took it off. He even comments jokingly, there must be a pretty woman inside here. The box is so heavy, and Zayak and Taylor are in such a rush that they start helping load the box to speed up the process. Because, Diana Jenkins, who flies private all the time, she always loads her own shit
on a private
jet.
Here's my question. I'm in the box. I'm Carlos Ghosn. I'm in the box. The way I would have just relentless nervous poops. I would be just, how do you stay silent in that box when you're like, this is the escape of a lifetime?
Also, all this money this guy has and connections, he couldn't have just paid off in advance, found one person at the airport to go, like, help me get this box
To
through.
Greece,
He couldn't have greased one.
Well, they tried. Taylor tried.
Yeah, in the moment. He just pulled 10 grand in loose pocket change out of this guy. This could have been done a month earlier.
So they're like, this is like classic movie stuff where they're like sitting on the tarmac. They're like, oh my God, are we going to get out of here, right? You might be thinking, all right, what is Ghosn up to at this time? Ghosn is sitting on the tarmac. He's freezing. The box has 200 holes in it. It's like a freezing night. Michael Taylor didn't even get Carlos Ghosn like a blanket. Carlos is like, where's my Montclair? Where's my Lord Piani? Where's the insulation for this box? After about 30 minutes, they get confirmation from the control tower and take off.
And Ghosn says in interviews after this that it was the longest 30 minutes of his life. I bet.
So the plane takes off at 11 p.m. and somehow this piece of shit dumpster fire of an escape works. And it wouldn't be an escape plan without a little champagne after. So they pop a bottle.
Wait, apparently when they went down in the stowage to get to see Ghosn, he was on top of the box sitting crisscross applesauce like, yay, we did it!
So this private jet is now headed to Istanbul, where they would land and the group would split. Ghosn would stay on the PJ and go to Lebanon, and Zayak and Taylor would fly there commercially to avoid suspicion.
Wow. So basically you wake up the next morning and Ghosn's like, surprise, bitches! I'm in Lebanon. So corporate gossip number 10 is the aftermath. He holds a press conference. He's like, I'm out, motherfuckers. I am now in Lebanon, and I will no longer be held hostage by a rigged Japanese justice system where guilt is presumed, discrimination is rampant. Here's what's interesting. There's never been a trial. We never get to see the evidence. On the one hand, you might say, okay, if you weren't guilty, why would you flee? Right? If you weren't guilty, then, you should be, your trial should go your way. But on the other hand, I think most people would if they had the means and they were in that position.
Absolutely. Given the circumstances of the Japanese government, I mean, if you're here in the States, you get your lawyer handles all your shit for you. There's nothing like that in Japan. It seems like from what I read, it was like you don't get your lawyer to defend you.
No. Oh, by the way, I should note the reason he went to Lebanon, obviously he's a citizen there, but also Lebanon does not have an extradition agreement with France or Tokyo. Right. So he was so lucky on so many accounts. One, that he's a Lebanese citizen. Two, that this plan worked. Like, there's so many things that
He's also
worked
got
in
that
his favor.
$10 million fuck pad in Beirut.
That's true. He's in this house that Nissan paid for. So once he escaped, Interpol puts out a red notice. Japanese and French have arrest warrants out for him. Investigations for financial malpractice, misuse of corporate assets, money laundering, and corruption. Interestingly, Ghosn files a $1 billion lawsuit against Nissan for his imprisonment in Japan. And this is his defense. This is from Collision Course. Looking back after his escape to Lebanon, Ghosn insisted that he might never have landed in such legal trouble if he hadn't been so steadfastly loyal to Renault and Nissan in the face of all the job offers. He could have packed up for Detroit. He could have led Ford or GM. You know, he talks about when he got a job offer from GM, and he says, you know, he was offering me a pay which was double my pay. I said, you know what? I understand your offer is very attractive, but a captain of the ship doesn't leave the ship in difficulty. Ghosn said, I made a mistake. I should have accepted the offer. Like, okay, I'm just too loyal. I'm too much of a hard worker, and that's why I was persecuted. So there's collateral damage here. Yeah, Ghosn is now in Beirut as an $18 million fuck pad, but Zayak and Michael Taylor are sentenced to 2 years in prison in Japan.
Peter Taylor is also.
Oh, he is too?
Yeah.
And Greg Kelly is left really holding the bag. He's in and out of Japanese jail for a few years for helping Ghosn evade Japan's pay disclosure laws. I would be pissed if I were him. And Nissan claims 83 million euros in damages from Ghosn and about 11 million in damages from Kelly. Nissan's also fined 1.6 million euros for not disclosing Ghosn's comp. So you ready for some of the takeaways?
Yeah, let's do it.
So here's the thing. Ghosn's in Lebanon, and you might think like that's comparatively a better situation than he was in Japan. But I found this blog that Carlos posted in 2017, and he talks about his life, his plans for life after Nissan. And he says, I won't settle in one place. I'll travel all over the world. I cannot conceive of spending all my time in just one country. I am most at home on the move. I continue to believe in globalization and will continue to communicate its merits, which is so funny. I mean, really, this is a man of the world. He's a global person. He wants to be traveling constantly. And in some ways, being in Lebanon, not being able to leave this relatively small country is pretty big punishment for him. Here's a quote about Ghosn from his ex-wife, Rita. After he was arrested, she said, all narcissists are hypocrites. They pretend to have morals and values they really don't possess. Behind closed doors, they lie, insult, criticize, disrespect, and abuse. They can do and say whatever they want, but how dare you say anything back to them or criticize them? Ultimately, I think you got to go back to childhood. Like, he tried so hard to escape the legend of his father, but he couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe his fate was sealed from the start. Also, to talk about Kelly, I think this is another case very similar to what we talked about in the last episode with Caroline Ellison, Nishad Singh, and everybody involved in the SBF and FTX trial, which I personally don't believe that Greg Kelly intended to do fraud. Maybe it's because he has a very sympathetic face to me. Like he just seems like a nice dude, and maybe that's my bias, but he just doesn't strike me. I think he had a lot of pressure from the company to keep Ghosn happy, and he did what he had to do to get that done.
Yeah.
And it really kind of sucks that he wasn't in a position to do what was right, or maybe he just didn't have the moral fortitude. I don't really know, but I think he's kind of a tragic figure in this whole story.
Mm-hmm.
Any other takeaways from you?
No, just don't be greedy.
It's
be thankful
not
for
worth it.
In the holidays are right around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
Be thankful for what you have.
And like, think about it this way. If Ghosn hadn't been, I think the moment where everything went south is when he decided to be CEOs of two companies. He could have ended up a hero.
Yeah. He could have been a hero, but he always wanted more.
Isn't that how the story goes?
Yeah.
Mike,
Do you think that's what he was humming in the box? I could be your hero, baby. Taking little puffs out of the hole. I could be your hero, Chevy. All the companies you could have worked for.
All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. We had a lot of fun. As always, if you want to follow along, there was a ton of pictures for this episode. So check out our Substack. They'll all be linked there, along with the articles we read and the books we read. The 2 books we read, Collision Course and Boundless, will be on our bookshop.org storefront. And of course, there's tons of documentaries and podcasts as well. I also listened to the HBR. They did a nice like four-part episode on the Carlos Ghosn case. So lots of good material here. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so by clicking the link in our show notes to the buy us a coffee link. And I think that's it. This will be our second to last episode. Next week is going to be our finale. We're going to do Chobani, and then we're going to answer some questions. So yeah, look forward to that. It's been a great season, guys. I've loved every minute of it. I hope you have too. And we'll see you next week.